Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Tonight we have several breaking stories as we come on the air. The first involving President Trump. The Wall Street Journal tonight reporting that Attorney General Pam Bondi told President Trump that his name appears multiple times in the Jeffrey Epstein files. Also breaking tonight, there's been an officer ambush. The details just coming in. And in New York City, the suspect who police say placed improvised explosive devices around the city, one thrown right onto the subway tracks. First tonight, the Wall Street Journal now reporting Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy Todd Blanche told President Trump back in May that his name appears in the Jeffrey Epstein files multiple times. The Attorney General reportedly recommending to the president at the time not to release any more files and that the president defer to the AG. How the Justice Department is now responding tonight. Also the dramatic scene in court, raw emotion from family members and what they told the killer in the Idaho College murders. Face to face from him in the courtroom today, one of the survivors speaking out, and what the father of one of his victims said to Brian Koberger, standing just feet away. Also tonight, the dangerous, life-threatening heat. Nearly 140 million Americans under dangerous heat alerts at this hour from Texas all the way up to the Northeast. Tonight in Chicago, it feels like 103, even hotter tomorrow. Cincinnati, Detroit 2, and New York City will soon feel like 105. Ginger Z is standing by. Tonight, the disturbing video showing a police officer accused of punching a black driver in the face during a traffic stop. Tonight, the sheriff in that community now calling the incident ugly. And Lindsay Davis tonight interviewing the driver. In New York City, the alarming discovery, a suspect accused of allegedly leaving at least 5 homemade bombs on rooftops across the city, and authorities say throwing one IED right out of the subway tracks. Tonight, the heartbreaking discovery, authorities finding the body of that missing student last seen leaving the bar. Her parents had pleaded for the public's help, and what authorities are now saying. Tonight, the alarming images in the water off the east coast of Florida. You will see this man attacked by a shark. And America Strong tonight, every night here, we get story ideas from so many of you at home, in hometowns across this country. Well, tonight, the idea came from my own hometown. We'll dive into, and we promise you'll be cheering along with that whole community tonight. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David.
On another matter, over the past few days, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has unveiled shocking new evidence that former President Barack Obama and top aides in the Obama administration conspired to subvert President Trump's 2016 election victory and undermine the democratic will of the American people. While publicly pretending to engage in a peaceful transfer of power, in private, former President Obama went to great and nefarious lengths to try to sow discord among the public and sabotage his successor, President Trump. The new evidence released by the Director of National Intelligence, who is here with me today, confirms that the Obama administration manufactured politicized intelligence, which was later used as the justification for baseless smears against President Trump in an effort to try to delegitimize his victory before he even took the oath of office. The truth is that President Trump never had anything to do with Russia, and the Russia collusion hoax was a massive fraud perpetuated on the American people from the very beginning. And the worst part of this is Obama knew that truth, and so did all of the other corrupt officials involved in this scam, including former CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former FBI Director James Comey, former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and many others. Director of National Intelligence Gabbard's report further confirms what we already knew. There was no collusion, no corruption, except on the part of Barack Obama and the weaponized intelligence agencies at the time. The Russia hoax was a blatant lie, all ginned up by Democrat political operatives that were signed off on by then-President Obama and leaked to the news media to launch a years-long witch hunt against President Trump and his first administration. Allies of the president, including his own son, Donald Trump Jr., were disgustingly smeared as Russian assets, and some even had their lives destroyed because of this vicious lie. The president's first 2 years in office had this fake distraction hanging over it, and endless resources, time, and political capital were spent having to debunk these lies from the highest levels of our government. Now, nearly 10 years later, thanks to the declassification of documents by Director Gabbard, the truth has finally come to light. And this truth vindicates President Trump, his family, and his many allies and associates who were smeared with defamatory lies. President Trump was right from the beginning about all of this, and we are grateful that justice can be served. Now, we have even more damning evidence implicating those who tried to sabotage a duly elected president and did grave material harm to our republic. Thanks to additional important work done by CIA Director Ratcliffe, Committee Chairman Rick Crawford over the past few months, a newly declassified 2020 report prepared by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which DNI Director Gabbard has declassified, found that the intel community did not have any direct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect President Trump in 2016, and in fact, Russia was actively preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory. But at the unusual direction of Barack Obama at the time, the intel community published implausible intelligence suggesting otherwise. Why? To sabotage the incoming president. This is truly one of the greatest political scandals in American history. And reporters at legacy outlets, some of which are sitting in this room today, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, were ridiculously awarded Pulitzer Prizes for their perpetuation of this hoax. It's well past time for those awards to be stripped from the journalists who receive them. It is not journalism to propagate political disinformation in service of the Democrat Party and those in the intelligence community who hand over out of context and fake intelligence to push a false
A precarious rescue operation this Wednesday night. The mission to save 3 miners trapped underground in northern BC. Who's named in the Jeffrey Epstein files? The reports U.S. President Trump has known for months he's in the documents. The UN's highest court says having a healthy environment is a human right.
That the consequences of climate change are severe and far-reaching.
The potential legal penalties if countries and companies don't protect the planet. Plus, a secret of the seabed with a Canadian connection. How marine archaeologists identified this 250-year-old shipwreck.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with a developing story in northern BC. A complex rescue operation is underway for 3 miners who are trapped underground. It's happening nearly 900 kilometers north of Prince George, near the community of Dease Lake. The Red Chris mine is operated as an open-pit copper and gold mine. Employees were working underground. Global's Neithu Garcha is following the story for us tonight. Neithu.
Carolyn, here's what we know so far and why the clock is ticking at Red Chris Mine. This all started on Tuesday. There were 2 separate fall of ground inside an underground access tunnel up in Newport.
New report by the Wall Street Journal revealing... Tonight, the Epstein Files bombshell. A new report by the Wall Street Journal revealing the DOJ told President Trump months ago that his name is in the unreleased Epstein Files. The Attorney General Pam Bondi tonight doubling down, saying nothing in the files warrants further investigation. And this just in, congressional lawmakers setting a date to depose Ghislaine Maxwell in person. Also breaking tonight, we'll take you inside the Idaho courtroom and that gut-wrenching testimony. Friends and family of Brian Kohberger's victims addressing the convicted killer directly, sharing harrowing impact statements. One surviving roommate from that brutal night speaking publicly for the first time. The chilling plot to bomb New York City, homemade explosive devices found in one of Manhattan's busiest neighborhoods. The Jacksonville man punched during a traffic stop, speaking out for the first time after his video went viral. What he told me about the moment police punched him in the face. The high-profile apology from one of the biggest names in sports, months after this Ole Miss college student spoke exclusively to us on camera about a vicious and false rumor that changed her life forever. A doctor charged in Matthew Perry's shocking 2023 overdose death, pleading guilty to charges. Shocking and tragic moments in Italy, a small plane nosediving down onto a busy highway. And our good news tonight, the 7th grade kidcaster, the moment he got his big break, then taking over the Mets broadcast booth, calling the game alongside baseball legends. Nightly News starts right now. This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Yamas.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. warn a summer of unrest could cause untold damage.
Public anger mounts as it's revealed that thousands of asylum seekers are using taxpayers' money to gamble.
Protests break out near a four-star hotel that's set to house asylum seekers this summer.
So is this the start of a summer of civil disorder?
The countdown's on to Donald Trump's arrival in Scotland, but police warn they're not prepared for the visit, as officers are sent to fill security gaps last minute.
MPs from across the divide unite to demand that the government does more to tackle pensioner poverty.
NHS patients warned of devastating delays as resident doctors push on with their 5-day strike starting tomorrow.
Food industry leaders lash out at the government's family farms tax with a stark warning that food security could be threatened.
School's out and many of us are heading off on summer holidays. We're debating if it's selfish or not for parents to jet off without the kids.
Strongly. In sport this morning, Lionesses now know that they'll be playing Spain in the final of the Euros on Sunday after they beat Germany 1-0 in extra time, which happened last night. In cricket, England just about edged day one of the fourth test against India. Marcus Rashford becomes the first Englishman to sign for Barcelona in nearly 40 years.
A fairly settled day for much of the UK, but there will be some areas of rain moving in. Find out about weather in your area with me later on.
Just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Parisians and the city's tourists. Take a stroll with Valérie Fayon. Discover Paris Desert on France 24 and France24.com. Watching Daybreak here on France 24. I'm Stuart Norval. Main headlines today. More deaths from hunger reported in Gaza as aid organisations say a large proportion of the population is now starving. That as diplomatically, the US's Middle East envoy arrives in Europe for talks which could include meeting with advisors to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. European leaders call on China to use its influence with Russia to help end the Ukraine war as they begin a visit to Beijing. Talks centering on Ukraine and as well on trade, with Europe worried about further influxes of cheap Chinese goods. We'll talk to our correspondent, Yennelie in Beijing. And who could ask for more if you're a fan of Taylor Swift? Now there are 13 more of them set to be placed in 13 worldwide cities. It's created by the Waxwork Museum at Two Swords for its latest Superstar project. This is history.
Hiroshima from Father to Daughter starts August 2nd on DW.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. U.S. media outlets are reporting that President Donald Trump was informed in May that his name appears in materials related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. Calls to declassify those documents have grown louder with Trump's relationship to the convicted sex offender under close scrutiny. The latest round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul have ended after less than an hour. Russia's lead negotiator said the Ukrainian and Russian positions on ending the war were still far apart. Kyiv's envoy proposed direct talks between Ukraine's President Zelensky and Russia's Vladimir Putin before the end of August. Israel's parliament has backed a symbolic motion to annex the occupied West Bank. The vote was 71-13 in favor. Some 3 million Palestinians and more than 500,000 Jewish settlers live in the West Bank. Its annexation would make it impossible to form a viable Palestinian state alongside Israel. This is DW News from Berlin. You'll find more on our website. That's at dw.com.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on today's program. The Venezuelan man sent to maximum security prison by the Trump administration speaks out.
Plus, epic braces for another protest outside a hotel housing asylum seekers as the local MP urged the government to get a grip on the situation.
It's Thursday, the 24th of July. Your headlines. After 4 months in a foreign prison, finally the homecoming. We speak to a man arrested under Donald Trump's controversial ICE raids.
We were constantly beaten. We suffered physical, verbal, and psychological abuse. There wasn't a day where the wardens didn't tell us that the only way we'll leave that place was if we were dead.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in the UK to sign a landmark free trade agreement with Sir Keir Starmer. Welfare versus warfare. We look at the challenge facing governments in paying for both a bigger defence budget and a welfare state. And England will play displaying in the Euros final this weekend following the 2023 World Cup showdown. A very good morning to you. Our top story, Arturo Suarez fled the US to escape Venezuela's authoritarian government in North Carolina. President Trump's controversial immigration crackdown sent to an Eldor jail. Now, wrongs of being in Canada.
Find the podcast on the ABC Listen app. Today, Australia to lift restrictions on beef imports from the US ahead of tariff negotiations with the White House. Also ahead, Australia's largest private hospital operator to close most of its psychology clinics. Medics in Gaza say more Palestinians are dying of starvation, while Israel ignores global calls to let more aid in. And a freak tornado tears through Perth's western suburbs, damaging homes and uprooting trees. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Australia has lifted trade restrictions on US beef, easing a key concern of the Trump administration. Imports of beef slaughtered in the United States but raised in Mexico and Canada had been banned on biosecurity grounds. Political reporter Tom Lowry has more from Canberra.
The government saying that it's done the work over the past decade really to analyse the biosecurity in India, North America more broadly, Canada and Mexico, and says it's now safe to resume beef imports from the US involving cattle that were raised in Mexico and Canada. That's been, I suppose, the sticking point. 6 or 7 years ago, the government eased restrictions on beef that was raised in the United States, slaughtered in the US and then imported to Australia. But there's been almost no trade because the US says the markets are too intertwined with Mexico and Canada. So now those restrictions have been eased somewhat further, allowing cattle that was born in Mexico or born in Canada but slaughtered in the US to come to Australia. All this being said, we're not...
This is Asia Now.
It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 New Delhi, and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Rani Samtani. At this hour, tensions flare between Thailand and Cambodia with reports of fresh clashes. Reports after Bangkok closed shared crossings and recalled its ambassador to protest a landmine blast which a Thai soldier lost sight. China and the European Union mark 50 years of relations. President Xi Jinping meets the bloc's leaders, talks of increasing mutual trust, but tensions over trade and economic policy could dampen their high-stakes summit in Beijing. And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in London to sign a landmark trade deal with the UK. 99% of Indian exports to Britain are set to benefit from zero duties under the pact.
Africa News. The news. Renewed fighting in the DRC's eastern North Kivu region, despite the ink being barely dry on a peace deal signed last week in Doha between Kinshasa and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels. Residents of villages in Masisi territory have been forced to flee their homes after days of clashes between M23 and Wazalendo fighters from the pro-government NDC group. The United Nations Radio Okapi says the fighting is taking place on several fronts, including in parts of neighbouring Walikale territory. Local sources say the conflict erupted early on Tuesday with an attack by M23 rebels against several Wazalendo positions in the south of Masisi territory. Immediately after signing the peace accord in Doha, both sides appeared to contradict one another in their interpretation of a major highlight of the declaration about whether the rebels would withdraw from seized territories or not.
Summary executions and enforced disappearances. These are the accusations Human Rights Watch made against Mali's armed forces and the Russian Wagner group on Tuesday, saying that both had committed numerous crimes against men of the Fulani ethnic group. The NGO said that it documented at least a dozen Fulani men who were executed and 81 others who were forcibly disappeared by the Malian army and the Wagner group since January of this year. The alleged crimes happened during joint operations targeting Islamist militias. According to Human Rights Watch, Islamist armed groups frequently attempt to recruit Fulani men. This has made the entire community a target for the Malian government.
Nigerian Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uwadwan has vowed to take the Senate leadership back to court after she was barred from entering the National Assembly building on Tuesday. In March, the senator was issued a 6-month suspension from the chamber after she accused Senate President Godswill Akpabio of sexual harassment. The court lifted the sanction and called for her to be reinstated, but armed guards refused her access when she tried to return. Akpoti-Uwadwan is one of just 4 women out of 190 senators. She accused the Assembly of contempt of court, saying its actions raise questions about respect for democracy. The Senate, however, called the court ruling a non-binding opinion. It said Akpoti-Uwadwan has also been found in contempt for violating a ban on speaking publicly about the case.
Just one day after the US announced it's withdrawing from UNESCO once again, China is firing back. Beijing has condemned the move, which halts US funding and participation. The decision comes just 2 years after the Biden administration rejoined, ending a 5-year absence that began under President Trump. We've noticed that UNESCO and multiple countries have expressed regret over the US decision to withdraw once again. This is the 3rd time the US has withdrawn from UNESCO, and it has been long in arrears on its membership dues. This is not the behaviour befitting a responsible major country. The White House says UNESCO promotes anti-Israel bias, and US involvement is no longer in its national interest.
Preparations to host the African Nations Championship, or CHAN, across 3 East African countries are at an advanced stage, ahead of the official kickoff on August 2nd. Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. Kenyan officials say their country is raring to go.
It's just to confirm to Kenyans that we are ready to host CHAN. Everything else that is required of us, we have done, and CAF has confirmed that we are making good progress.
Leron Musengo Oba, the General Secretary of the Confederation of African Football, confirms that it's all systems go for the tournament.
We are ready. Of course, there's something to be fixed, like the chair to put there to move from one place to another, but we are ready to kick off on 2nd of August.
During CAF's final inspection of sports facilities in Kenya, the General Secretary praised the efforts made by the 3 host countries.
3 of them, they are doing well, and the coordination very well, exchange of information very well. I think that this is we have to learn from here in Africa, to see 3 countries, they put effort together, they put resources together to deliver this competition.
The hospitality industry is also looking forward to the tournament, and the tourists expected to flock to the host countries. Football fans are hoping for an electric expected to be Africa's first African Nations Championship. Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania are expected to use this tournament as proof of their ability to host the Africa Cup of Nations, scheduled for later this year.
Africa now has its own voice. This is Africa News, the only international news channel made for Africa. An independent voice, bringing you unbiased reporting and all the voices shaping the future of the continent. Find out what Africa has to say. Africa News, your voice.
Thousands of small boats are preparing for a new fishing season at the artisanal harbour of
The world's because of the kids, not because of you. Nobody cares about you.
A killer comes face to face with family and friends of 4 murdered college students.
Before he's put away for life.
You're evil. You took our children. You are gonna suffer, man.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Maurice Dubois.
I'm John Dickerson.
Brian Kohlberger, a 30-year-old former criminology student, was sentenced today to 4 consecutive terms of life in prison.
1 for each of the 4 University of Idaho students he stabbed to death in November of 2022. Kohlberger admitted to the murders earlier this month in a plea deal that spared him from a possible death sentence.
But Kohlberger would not be spared from the raw emotions of the victims' loved ones. The killer did not offer an apology or an explanation for the murders.
Jonathan Bigliotti was in court today, and he leads us off tonight from Boise, Idaho. Jonathan.
John, it was an incredibly emotional day. Even the judge struggled to hold back tears as he called Brian Kohlberger evil. I was in that courtroom, only a few feet away from Kohlberger, and I watched as he locked his gaze on everyone who spoke in that room. But what struck me the most was when the photos of his victims were projected on a screen. He did not look.
I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking.
Today's sentencing hearing was the first time family and friends of the 4 victims spoke in court, addressing the man who murdered their loved ones face to face, Brian Kohlberger. Every word filled with heartbreak.
My sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take.
Surviving roommate Dylan Morganson spoke through tears.
I don't know how it...
Good evening.
Jeff Bennett on the NewsHour tonight. The White House cuts regulations for artificial intelligence in an effort to compete with China in a technological arms race.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard pushes baseless claims about former President Obama and the 2016 election as the White House faces pressure over the Epstein investigation.
And national parks across the country struggle under drastic funding and staffing cuts.
Our national parks are really the place that preserves our history. And national park rangers are the most beloved and important storytellers in this nation.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More than 100 humanitarian organizations are demanding action to end Israel's siege on Gaza, warning mass starvation is spreading across the Palestinian territory. The NGOs, including Amnesty International, Oxfam, Doctors Without Borders, warn, quote, illnesses like acute watery diarrhea are spreading. Markets are empty, waste is piling up, and adults are collapsing on the streets from hunger and dehydration, unquote. Their warning came as the Palestinian Ministry of Health said the number of starvation-related deaths in Gaza has climbed to at
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.